works, and there are two systems in the body that are responsible for coordination. What are the two systems? What two systems in our body are responsible for coordination? How we react? Silence. Nervous system is one. Good, 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 good. What's the next?
And the skeletal system?
What's the next one? We are responded by nerves. What's the other one that causes us to respond? I thought you know that we talk about things like the the menstrual cycle. What is it that the body responds to? The body responds to silence. The body responds to, what is it? Estrogen, progesterone, what are they?
Chemicals.
They are chemicals, and they are chemicals that we call what? Hormones. So definitely. So there are two parts to the what we call the coordination in the body. On the one hand, you have nervous coordination, and on the other hand, you have chemical coordination. So if I should write up nervous coordination, chemical coordination on the other hand, all right? These are the things that runs our body, nervous and chemical. Now, one of them, anybody without I teaching you anything, what are the difference between the two? What difference do you have between nervous coordination and chemical coordination? Do you have any difference? Anything different between the two of them?
Chemical is released and nervous is transferred.
Chemical is what?
Released it.
What do you mean by that?
Like certain amount, it's made in the body and released it out.
So with the chemical, you say it is made in the body. All right, made in the body. What else?
And the nerve is felt or transferred, like how the nervous system responds and transfers something to the brain.
Okay, let's try and compare them on the same criteria, right? Let's try and on the same thing. For example, if we're talking about what makes up the nervous system. Nervous system is made up by neurons and nerve. What makes up the chemical system?
Hormones and chemicals.
Hormones. So you see where we are doing. We are comparing them on the same. What next? Let us look at the speed of transmission. Which one do you think has a faster transmission? Which one has a slower transmission? The what? The neuron has a?
Nerve is faster.
Okay. So you see how you know a lot of things, but you just are bookish. So you just think book, oh, I haven't read this, so I don't know. So right away you see them and you're comparing them on the same criteria. What are they made of? Nerve versus chemical. What's the speed of transmission? One is quick, relatively quick, and most new chemicals are slow, except for there is one that acts very quickly. And anybody know which one is that?
Dopamine.
The what?
Dopamine.
What dopamine does?
It's like a reward system for the body.
And what? And what time does that reward system kicks in?
What'd you say?
I'm asking. You say you're using your psychology, yes, with the brain producing that. But when you get angry and the person said that there is a kind of, and the term said there's a rush, what kind of
adrenaline?
adrenaline rush. So adrenaline is a fast-acting hormone, not as fast as the nervous system, but it acts very quickly. So that's one of the fastest-acting hormones. Okay, so that's very important that we get that understanding. So right away, let's look at one more features of the nervous system versus the chemical system.
Mr. Dawkins, I
Yes.
have to leave. I'll come right back after I finish what I do.
Okay. All right. So this one now is in terms of the effect. How long does it last? Which one is longer lasting? The nervous or the chemical?
The chemical.
Chemical is longer lasting. It takes a longer time in the body. For example, on the onset of puberty and when those hormones are released, they last in your body for a long time. When a pin stick you, it's just quick, bam, the transmission. So there are three differences right there you have without looking in any book or looking in anywhere. All right? So that's what we want to talk about. Now, if you also look here, you notice that we have an outline. So today we'll look at, make an outline of the nervous system. And I already started comparing it with chemical and nervous. Distinguish between central and the peripheral nerve function of the different parts of the brain. Distinguish between reflex arc and reflex action. Compare simple reflex and conditional reflex action, and the difference between involuntary and voluntary action. Is my image in the side the way of you seeing this chart?
Yes, sir.
Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, let me make it smaller. That's better now?
I can see it.
So you're not seeing my image in it then? Okay. Nervous system. Look what we have here. This is general. I usually give you a concept map for you to get the main idea. So the division of the nervous system, in which we have the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So you are right when you mention that. So the brain and the spinal cord are part of the central nervous system. The brain, the spinal cord. So the brain is what is inside this big cup up here. The spinal cord is the part that runs right through your backbone, okay? Which is really an extension of the brain, okay? The second part of it is those connections to that part. So all the nerves that run, every one of your vertebrae has a nerve running from it, all right? And those contain what we call the spinal nerves. Those are down from 31 of them, and the cranial nerve are those that supply the head. So those that goes to your tongue, those that go to your ear, those that goes to your nose, those that goes to your eye, all of those are called cranial nerves. Okay, so that is very, very important. There are 12 pair of them coming from each side of the spinal cord there. And then you have, those come from the vertebrae, so all the way from the vertebrae in your back. And each vertebrae, there are 2 of them that are coming out, 1 from each side. One carry information, and they carry information back and forth. Now, so we call them peripheral because they are on the outside of, but they are very, very important. They are the ones that brings information and dispatch information, bring information to the central nervous system, and takes information from the central nervous system to actions that we're supposed to do, okay? Now, under the peripheral nervous system, we can further divide that into what we call voluntary control and involuntary control. There are some things that, for example, if I want to take up this paper, I have to take this paper myself. I have to get up from this chair and walk. All of those are called voluntary action. I do them because I want to do them. Then you have the automatic system, or autonomic, system, which are two parts, what we call the sympathetic nerve and the parasympathetic nerve. So those are, they work outside of our control. For example, a baby, they will just urinate because that is autonomic for them. After a time, we learn to control that. But when you really get nervous and frightened, all of a sudden, you wet yourself, your knees start shaking. All of those things come to play. You feel like there's a rush of blood to your head. People say they feel like their head get big. All of those are what we call the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. One of them speeding you up, one slowing you down. Those are outside of your control, okay? So that's the chart in a quick run. That is what we need to understand today, all right? Any question on that? That's the main points that we're dealing with. Any question? So that is the idea that I want you to hold in your head as we go through. Now, so the main idea we're looking at, we say coordination is the way in which receptors detect stimulus and then the nerve impulses are sent to the effector. So when we're dealing with coordination, it's a work or a relationship between the nerves and the central nervous system. The nerves in our organ detects, send information for processing, information comes back to these organs for action. Sometimes they take very quick. For example, you know, if you step on something hot, that doesn't take any time for the information. The information does not reach the brain in that way. It sends to the, and we don't know how this happened or why is it, but these are protective functions. To get to the brain would take too long for processing. So once you hit a hot pot, the nerve is sent right to your spinal cord. Your spinal cord determines that this is an emergency and send action right away. So you act without thinking. There's no thought inside of these reflex action. They just happen to protect you. Okay, you walk in and you slip, right away this impulse sent to your spinal cord back to you. You're all in, and it's so amazing because all the muscles that need to coordinate to catch you, to prevent you from falling, works together to get you doing that. It's amazing how this body works. All right, so coordination. So in mammal, coordination is carried out through the activities of the nervous system, as we said, the endocrine system. Now, I'm not going to read everything there because you will have it. One we have there is that the nervous system, the foundation of the nervous system is the nerve cell, or what we commonly call the neuron. Just take a minute and look at that neuron that you have there, and let us see if we can get in our heads what the parts are of a neuron.
Mr. Dawkins, I already know what the parts of a neurons is and what this do. I learned this in psychology. I have a test.
Okay, very good. So we don't need to spend time on that. So you tell me then very quickly then.
Okay, so the dendrites is basically the branchy. It look like a deer, the hooves of a deer. I think that's what they name the hooves.
Oh.
Anyways, it reaches out so to make a connection between different neurons. It holds receptor sites, which contains neurotransmitters, the chemical that is released from the neuron. From the dendrites, and it shoots and fires to another neuron to bring it alive. A neuron normally is dead until it is fired, and it receives the neurotransmitters. A neuron is positive at 40 MV, and when a neuron fires, it can't be a little bit. It has to be at the same amount each time it fires. The myelin sheath, the synapse. I know all of these stuff. Basically
Okay.
already.
It sounds like you know it very well. You're saying it right, okay? I note that a nerve is very long, all right? And what you say that the nervous system, these nerve cells, they act upon a all or nothing, all right? So as you rightly said that if it's used to fire at, let's say 3 volts, it needs 3 volts to fire. It is not going to fire with less or more, all right? So that is very, very important. And the myelin sheet is that insulator, like the wires that we have on cables like these. These are the insulators. Your myelin sheet is like your insulator for your nerve. So it prevents them from shorting out. So that's very important. I am proud of you getting all of that, Mr. That's who Mr. Wallace, drilling you in the right
Yeah.
stuff. Okay, good. All right. So that's one. Remember that there are 2 types of nerves though, or 3 types. What are they called? One is the
No, I learned that.
sensory nerve, motor nerve, and
Oh,
intermediate nerve. Okay, so there are 3 of them, and you need to know them differently. The one that you're looking at now is the example of a motor nerve. A motor nerve has the dendrites, or what you call the darantellas at the end, all right, where the cell body is. So that is very important that you get that. Look at this one that I'm showing you. So you see 2 of them here again. This one is the motor nerve. You see the cell body with the antennas around them. All right, and down here you have the actioning terminal that join with another head, right? As you rightly said. And there you have the neurotransmitter in between. So you know that your painkillers work where the neurotransmitters are, right? It slows down the neurotransmitter and some of them speed it up. All right, so this is a sensory nerve. The cell body is towards one side, all right? So the cell body does not have any dendrites around it, all right? So and then you have these, the other part of it, they have their dendrites as well. And then you have the actioning terminal, which is embedded in a muscle or somewhere down here. So in between them now, you will have an intermediate neuron that will have dendrites like these at both ends because they have to form connection between the motor nerve and the sensory nerve. So where do you usually find a lot of these connector neurons?
of the connecting neurons in the brain, maybe.
Yes, in the brain and in the spinal cord. For remember
Spinal
that the
cord,
nerve
yeah.
go in is the sensory and the one out is the motor. So these are connection between the both of them. All right, so that's very good there, right? So we said there are 3 types of neuron. Take note of those. I don't think I have a picture of the intermediate one there, or what we call associate neurons. So be aware of these name changes as we go along. Some of these names, we have the different names like that. Just be aware that you have differences to names, right? So a nerve is a bundle of nerve fiber, usually myelinated and surrounded by a sheet of white connective tissue. Impulse do not jump from one fiber to another because of the presence of the fatty substance in the nerve, right? They jump at the terminals between the dendrites and the actioning terminal. That's where that takes place. So here you have a nerve, which is a bundle of neurons together. So all of these, they run like fiber optic cables. Am I using the right thing? Or, you know, these telephone wires, you have a big cable on the outside and inside you have a number of smaller wires. That is what a nerve is, really a bundle of nerve cells. All right? We talk about nerve fibers found inside the central nervous system. do not have insulating fatty layers, right? All right, in sensory nerves, there may be a ganglia where the cell body are situated. A ganglia is where a number of cell body comes together. And the karate expert will tell you that within your body, there are certain positions where a lot of those, where you have those ganglias. So you knock a person there, automatically they weak out because there's just a knot of nerves there, all right? And one of them is in your chest area, so forth. Okay, so nervous impulse. This is what is happening that you are explaining. Is that impulses need to jump across a synapse. So the position between two nerve is called a synapse. So this is one nerve over here, and this is another nerve. They are not connected together, right? There's a gap between them, and there's a fluid called acetylcholine between them that facilitate the transmission. So what happened when the nerve come in, impulse, it jumps across the gap, and that speeds it up. It's like the spark from an electric current. If you put two wires close together, they actually have that spark happening. And so right where in this gap right here, where the fluid is, you tend to have the transmission taking place there. So that's why you have this right here with the cell body, and then you have, so this is called a synapse there.
Mr. Dawkins.
Yes.
Under acetylcholine is like I think a chemical too, or hormone too. It is prevent Parkinson's disease and something like that.
Yes, what it does there, it facilitates the nervous impulse jumping across. So that's why I mentioned that when you take Panadols and Panadines and all of these things, they work on the acetylcholine, so they filter out the pain impulse at that point. So they kind of transform the acetylcholine and other chemicals there too. It's not only one, and it filters out the pain impulse. So when you take this pain tablet, it's not that you are not it's not that the pain is not there, but what it does, it blocks the pain. And that's where it can be dangerous. In some people, the pain, that little temporary time, it helps you to heal. For some people, that's why I use, and it wears out after time. So that's why they tell you that your painkiller you have to take every 4 hours, because after a while it's gone and the pain is still there. So basically what we should try to do is to find the source of our pain rather than taking something to try and stop the pain or to stop the transmission of the pain impulse. Okay, for example, you break a foot or the person on the athletic field or the sports field, and they give them these painkillers. You go back out there trying to run the same way. You're just causing more damage to the structure. All right. Any other question? It's the ending of the axon secrete a chemical which diffuse into the synapse and stimulate the next neuron to pass the impulse. The chemical is unstable and will be destroyed later. Presence of synapse enables the nerve impulse to travel from one axon of a neuron to the dendrites of another neuron. It also allows a higher level of nervous coordination. So what is happening here? Please note that nerves, they are one-way street. What do I mean by that?
They only shoot forward. They don't go.
All right, good. So once they move one way, there's no backward flow on it. So that's why you need two nerves. One to take it and one to bring it. Okay, it's like a two-way street, a one-way street. The motor nerves carried in response from the brain or central nervous system to an organ or a structure. And the sensory one carry the information from that out. So the structure of two of them are different. And that's one of the key questions they used to ask you, the difference between a sensory nerve and a motor nerve in structure and function. Notice what I'm saying. I talk about structure and I also talk about function. So that is going to be important that we understand that. Okay.
They also call them afferent and
Right.
afferent
Yeah,
nerves.
definitely.
That's how I remember. No.
Okay, so that's a good word. So there's a picture here of what we say the central nervous system, which is, we say that is the brain and the spinal cord. So that's the brain up here. And then, so the brain, right, all of this here. And then you have the spinal cord going down there, okay? Now, so we know where the brain is so a function of the brain, function of the cerebrospinal fluid. Now, the cerebrospinal, so the brain has 3 layers of meninges, and in between the inner and two, this is filled with a cyber. Okay, so let's look at this. The brain is that tissue that is found inside your skull. The skull is that hard protective barrier. But inside of the skull, there are membranes. One of those membranes is we call the meninges. The meninges, and then you have one covering the inside and one covering the brain itself, much like the lungs, where you have the pleural membrane, one covering the lungs and one covering the inner side of the lungs. Sorry, the inside of the ribs. And that is important to prevent friction and in between these 2 membranes. So you have one covering the brain over here, one covering the skull over here, and in between them, you have this fluid that is called the spinal fluid. In the lungs, we refer to it as the pleural fluid, but in the brain, we say it's the cerebrospinal fluid. Now, what's the function of this fluid? And by the way, before I reach that, you have heard about the disease meningitis, okay? You have heard about that disease? No? It's a bacterial infection that affects,
Yes, sir.
yes, and it's a very dangerous infection because when bacteria invade the meninges or those lining of the brain, it can be very serious and it's usually result in death. So that is one thing that doctors usually with children, they try to make sure, especially if they're having a fever, they check to make sure that, and in order to make that, to rule that out, they have to pull some of the fluid from your spine. And that is where they get you and they put you in a bend and they stick this needle right in your back. It has to be carefully done. But if it's not done properly, it can cause paralysis. And they pull some of that fluid for testing to determine whether that you have meningitis. So meningitis can be a very serious one. So, turn on a little for me. Act as a cushion for absorbing external shock. All right. Where else do we find a fluid that acts as a cushion?
I don't know.
Yes, you know.
In the brain?
Yeah, that's the place we're talking about now. We talked about pregnancy before this, right?
Yes, sir.
And what's the name of that fluid?
That does what?
That acts as a shock absorber.
A shock absorber. The lateral?
No. In a pregnant woman?
As a shock absorber.
Yes. And that when that breaks, that all of the fluid comes out. Come on. Amniotic fluid. Right. So that acts as a shock absorber for the baby. So in the brain, you have the fluid around the brain, we call it cerebral spinal fluid. It acts as a shock absorber too. It nourishes the neuron as it enables the fusion of oxygen and food in the nerve cells. It also fills up the cavity called the ventricle of the brain, and in the central canal of the spinal cord. So it's not only covering the brain, it is within the brain as well. So it's really important in maintaining a stable environment around the brain. Okay, parts of the brain, we have 3 parts of the brain, so I want you to remember that. This diagram gives you them well. The cerebrum, don't get them mixed up now. The cerebellum and the medulla. You just say medulla oblongata. The cerebrum is the largest part of the brain. And just remember, anything conscious is the cerebrum. So you're hearing, you're seeing, you're tasting, you're smelling, all of those are processed by your cerebrum. Your cerebellum is that thing at the back, near the back of your head that looks like that cabbage when you cut it open. That is where your coordination of all, you want to throw a stone, or you want to run, you want to swim, where you have a number of muscle groups working at the same time. That's the cerebellum function. It coordinates those things and let them move very smoothly. When you drink, that's one of the parts that is really affected. Alcoholic drink I'm talking about. So the man walks and staggers because the coordination from that part. Not only is that part affected, vision is affected, every part of your body. A lot of the alcohol really plays a big role in your body. And then right down there, some people call the brain stem. Down the bottom there, you have the medulla, and that is the part that processes your unconscious action. So you have some very important parts inside of that there, like your sleep center. So when you sleep, your body is on autopilot, your heart working, your lungs working, your breathing, and things like those. Some of these things we take them for granted, but there are some people, if that center is affected, they can't breathe on their own like that. It affects their heart rate. It affects, so a lot of those unconscious action is right there. Now, right under the main brain in the cerebrum, there is a little part that is called the hypothalamus. And right there, you have sensors inside that links the chemical system with the nervous system, right there in the brain. So there's a link right there in that, under the base part, a very important structure. And it has to do with also, you may talk about the pituitary gland, which is a master gland. It controls all the hormones and so forth in the body. So those structures are very, very important. The brain is very detailed. I'm no expert, but I'm just giving you some of the basic things that you need to know. All right, so we talk about the cerebrum, cerebellum. Make sure you look at the spelling. cerebrum versus cerebellum. And then the medulla, the spinal cord. Running down now. I know you people bored quickly. Here we have the spinal cord. So the internal structure of the spinal cord arises from the medulla and runs through the backbone. Internal distribution of nerve cell body is similar to the medulla, where which the outer cortex contains white matter, while the inner cortex is a H shape and contains the gray matter. What is all that saying? When you look, so the internal distribution, the nerve So inside the spinal cord, if you cut the spinal cord, you're going to see a H shape inside of there. That H shape represents the, let me get it right, don't mix up, the cell bodies, all right? And on the outside is white. In terms of the brain, the outside is gray, the inside is white. I hope I'm getting it right there. It always gets mixed up. So let's look at this. Internal distribution of the nerve cell body, similar to the medulla oblongata, which the outer cortex contains the white matter, while the inner cortex contains the gray matter. Right, I'm right there. So in your spinal cord, the gray matter is on the inside. But on your brain, the gray matter, which represents the cell body, is on the outside. The axon is really what the gray matter is. So when you look at the spinal cord, you have the cell body on the inside, the axon on the outside, but in the brain, and it makes a lot of sense. The cell bodies are on the outside, all right? That makes sense to you?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. All right. So the brain kind of look gray, while the spinal cord kind of look white. And that is as a result of the part that we are seeing. The gray is the cell body on the outside, and in the spinal cord, they are on the inside. Okay. Now, comparing the gray matter and the white matter, the cerebrum and the cerebellum, all right? The white matter, which is the nerve fiber, is on the inner region, that is the brain, and the spinal cord and the medulla, it's on the outer region. The gray matter and the cerebrum is on the outward part, and the spinal cord is on the inner region. That's all I'm saying. I love making tables because it helps me to compare things and remember them very quickly. So that little table that you have there, you need to know where the white matter is and where the gray matter. That's the H I was talking about, right? So when you look here, you see one part here, the nerve coming out here. There's another part here with the nerve coming out. So here we have a sensory nerve called the afferent nerve on the outside, and then you have efferent one right here. You get that now? So here you have the white matter, and here you will have the gray matter. Good. Do you get that? Good? So
Okay.
those are what you're supposed to know. You have to know the parts of the brain and what the function of the different parts of the brain. Cool?
Cool.
Cool. All right. Okay, let me take another 5 or so minutes and run through this. The peripheral nervous system. It consists of what we said already, the cranial nerve and the spinal nerve. The cranial nerve, we say there are 12. You notice I run through this at the introduction with you, so you see them. This is what we call a reflex action or reflex arc right here. You have to know these. A reflex arc is made up of, let me just run down here. A reflex action is what? It's a quick automatic response to a stimulus, and the cerebrum does not involve in the response, all right? So it's a quick, immediate response, and the cerebrum does not immediately involve in that. So your brain knows about that after it's happened, all right? These are the parts of a reflex action. Step 1, arrival of a stimulus and the activation of the receptor. So here is you push your hand on a thumbtack, all right? So that's the sense organ that is affected. Then it's going to send that impulse through the, what next? Which nerve is this? That's the cell body to the side, so it's a what?
Sensors.
Yes, it's carrying information in. So it carry the information, that's the red now, into the and look at what happened. Inside of here, you have the intermediate neuron, which will send the information up to the brain, right? But while this is going on to the brain, there's a decision made here to send back a response via the motor nerve, and to send the action to the muscles that the muscles need to react. And look how the muscle react. The hand is taken away very quickly. All right, so it's send information to the muscles. And not only that, you may say something that comes out of your mouth that's not good to say right now. So that's why it is called, sorry, it's called a reflex arc, okay? A reflex arc right there, because it comes from here and it comes back here. The brain is not immediately. So it's a reflex action, all right? Make sense to you? Yes, no?
Yes, sir.
So outline the part for me very quickly, if you may. Tell me the part of a reflex arc.
Okay, so the part is when the stimulus is like when something bothers your body, or like, you know, it hurt or anything, a stimulus causes the body to react. The afferent neuron takes the information to the brain, but before it goes to the brain, not the afferent, sorry, the sensory the sensory neuron, as soon as the body reacts to the stimulus, the sensory neuron takes the information to the brain, but before it goes, communication is like happen, and then the motor neuron causes the body to react, and that information is taken to the brain and what's not.
Okay, so when you're writing it, 1, stimulus. 2, sensory nerve. 3, intermediate nerve spinal cord. Information sent onto the brain, but response sent by way to the motor nerve and to the muscle. So you're supposed to have about 4 or 5 different points there. And that is how you're supposed to write it, all right? Make sure that you can tell what happened at each stage, all right? That's good for you, all right? So Tucker, welcome back. We're wrapping up now. So those are what we have there, and I have, so basically we have what we call, so reflex action is a defense action, is something to protect the body. It's a part of your autonomic nervous system. You're not under control of it. For example, you can't stop blinking your eyes. You know, blinking your eyes as soon as things, that's a normal response. And they also have the knee jerk. When the doctor tap your knee's supposed to kick out. They do that to check the strength of your nervous system, how you're firing, and all of those things, okay? So those are reflex action, and reflex action is a part of which system? The central or the peripheral?
The who?
Reflex action. Where would you find it connected? The central or the peripheral nervous system?
Verbal.
Reflex action is a part of the central or the what? It's more peripheral because it has to do with spinal nerves, sensory nerve, motor nerve. The brain is involved later, but not immediately at front when it happened. So it's a protective function that it serves there. So just be aware of those things. When we talk about the central nervous system, we are really talking about the brain and the spinal cord. So what happened in the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the medulla, okay? And related to the spinal cord. So those are the main ideas that we are talking about. And then this last one, we talk about
where you going?
The pathway here. So this is part, so we receive the stimulus, the sensory neuron carry the impulse, all of this. The neuron carries the impulse to the effector. And then we say the associate neuron here before that carries the impulse to the cerebrum. Motor neuron carry the impulse to the effector, and the effector give the response. So those are the cycle. When we meet again, we'll go into a little more detail with this, where we're going to look at the eye, the ear, and these different organs. But I want you to know this is just the background. Make sure you know these points, people. And a lot of these, you know them already. Do not just, when you see a question, you just think of a book. Think. God give you a big brain, and there are things around you that you can associate with what is happening. Just think of what read what the question is asking. A lot of us just run to answer questions without knowing what the question is asking us. And that is a weakness for a number of students. So let's wrap up now where we started. We started with the nervous system. And here we said that's the general plan that we start with, that we have two systems that deal with coordination. System one is what's system one? You're going to leave me here? System one, what system? We have two systems deal with coordination. One is and the second one is nobody answering. Everybody gone. Two systems. What are they?
My Wi-Fi as well.
Okay.
Hold on, what did you say?
What are the two systems?
Central and peripheral.
Okay. No, that's a part of the nervous system. But I'm saying that two systems that has to do with coordination. The nervous system and the
No, chemical.
Chemical or endocrine system. Okay.
I understand that.
Okay. And what are the parts of the central nervous system?
Brain and spinal cord.
Okay. What are the parts of the brain?
The parts of the brain?
Yes.
Stem.
The cerebrum, cerebellum,
Yeah.
the medulla, the hypothalamus.
Okay. So, very good. Good. So you have the cerebrum, the cerebellum, the medulla oblongata, you have the hypothalamus, you have the pituitary, but the main part we are looking at is the cerebrum, cerebellum, medulla. Those are the three major parts, all right? And the brain has to deal with sense response, voluntary response. That's what deal with the brain. Or the cerebrum basically deal with all of those. The medulla deal with what kind of activities we say? Things that you are not immediately.
Involuntary.
Involuntary. And the cerebrum deals with, like you're doing a jumping jack, or you're running or you're swimming, that involve a lot of muscle group work in coordination together. So the medulla cerebellum deals with coordination. Okay? So that's my talk for this day with that. Later this evening, I will send for you I will send you a worksheet that you can work on and get to me for next week. And